Welcome to another episode of Inquiring Minds. I am Steve Harper. With me, as always, is my amazing co host, Donna Carlin. Donna, how are you doing today?
I'm great. How are you doing?
I am fantastic. I'm excited about today's conversation. I'm learning so much through this podcast, and it's been so amazing to to have these conversations. Every week. Count on them every week because I learn so much, and I'm hearing so much great feedback from our listeners. I'm just happy to be here. Let's just say that. So,
That makes
what
two
are we
of us.
talking about today?
So, what are your excuses and myths that are stopping you from living your best life?
Ooh, this
Not
uh,
an
this
easy
is
one, is it?
interesting. Yeah, this is a little heavy because I think we all do not want to admit the excuses that we make and potentially the myths or attitudes that we might buy into that are preventing us from getting to where we want to be. I know for a fact, as most of our topics tend to be, right? These are really thought-provoking conversations, and so I love this because it really is going to make us face some ugliness to a certain degree. I think in our lives,
Yeah.
both for how we deal with it in our personal life and also our professional life. So, you go first.
Oh, yeah. Great. Thanks. There are so many programs that we own because of how we're brought up,
Yep.
what we call the mimetic environment, everything around us that influences how we think, from social media, peer pressure, all that kind of stuff. And every day I come across myths and excuses that some of my clients have as to why they can't do something, instead of taking their energy and putting it towards, how can I do it? Not why I
Yep.
can't do it, but how can I do it?
Yep.
Not why can't I? I don't like that question. It's the how can I? What could you change? What do you have to let go of in your thought process in order to be able to move towards something that you would love to have or to do? And those myths, most of the time, until we have those conversations, they're not even aware that they're operating under those assumptions.
Yep.
And that's the hardest part, right? It's like
Yeah.
success in many ways are many people's worst roadblocks. It's like, I never thought I'd get this far. I don't want to rock the boat. I'm going to quit while I'm ahead.
Yep.
Or nobody in my family has ever made it past like this level. I'm already at this level. So if I get any higher, I'm going to show them up. They're not going to be happy with me. They're going to feel inferior. All the things, the assumptions, the myths, the excuses that they make in order not to shine, not to be out there, not to be as much as they could possibly be, or more of who they are.
Yep. So let me ask you a question. So for the coaching clients that you have, how many of these excuses and myths have they actually legitimately verbalized? Or how many of them, do they say that to themselves or do they even realize they're saying that to themselves? Because I find, at least with the clients that I've worked with, a lot of these attitudes, and that's really what it is. It's an attitude for success. It's a reason not to do something, or an excuse why it's just not possible. A lot of times they struggle to verbalize what it is because they've never actually pulled that thing out of the dark and shine some light on it to look at it. And so I'm curious, when you're engaged with a client, how often do you guys really immediately go in there and have that deep conversation to say, okay, what is affecting you? And I know you're exceptionally good at utilizing the power of a question to get people to think of things that they may have not ever thought of. And I would think around this element of excuse, especially when it comes to success or taking that next step in their life, you really uncover some of these things that are the underlying current of what's holding them back, what's keeping them in the present as opposed to what's the possible.
I'm a shadow coach. That is my work. I,
Yeah.
I shine a light on their darkest side of their psyche, their fears, their insecurities, all of that, and their hidden potential, or that which they've not yet discovered. And as it emerges, my job is to highlight what I just witnessed, help them see it and adopt it as their regular, everyday approach to things. So it's the full spectrum. The thing is, I could shine a light on something, but you need to do it in a way that's safe, that's respectful, and that doesn't
Yeah.
push their back against the wall where they're going to fight you. That's
Hmm.
that's one thing. The other thing is, what is the myth that they're operating under? That program is so strong within us, that we fight it every step of the way. In my
Yeah.
son's life, he loves his work, and he has been told by somebody in his life, not his wife or me, that's for sure, that until he's at the toppest level of the hierarchy, that's the only place that he could call himself successful.
Mm.
And he does not want to be at that level because he won't be working with people. He won't be working on files.
Right.
That's what
Right.
he so enjoys. And he's smart enough to realize that at this stage of his life. So,
That's good.
his answer was, maybe I'll go as far as director. I don't want to go any further. And the answer he got was, only stupid people stop there. And he was so taken aback. My question was, who asked that person? Did you
Yeah.
actually ask for that advice? Do you have to own somebody else's story of what is right and what is wrong? If you
That's
love what you do, keep on doing what you love. It's there's so much to this question. This When I was my first career, which is a gazillion years ago, lifetimes ago, as a percussionist, I was told by everyone, women do not go into percussion, because in those
yeah.
days women didn't go into percussion. And physically, it was a challenge. I was not tall enough to play chimes. I had to wear like 4-inch stilts in order to reach the top of the chimes, or be
Yep.
on a stair to be able to reach them. I don't care. I figured out a way to do it. Why doesn't a woman play percussion? Well, now women are percussionists, everywhere. It's the myths that you need to bust, because it's what people are used to. It's the
Yeah.
stories and programs that they are living with. And when you bust those, you start living your best life, because you're making choices based on who you are, what you do, and what your dreams are. And you're honoring those dreams in a way that's bringing them to fruition.
Yeah. No, that's great.
So,
I think, when as you're talking about Michael's situation as well as your own, it's interesting because what I really heard was how other people's, excuses and their myths were being placed on somebody else. Like for whoever said that to Michael as an example, they have probably hit their ceiling and they don't necessarily want anybody to bypass them. So the best way to keep the lobster in the box is by, shoving it down, right? And I find that a lot of times with my clients, it's those folks that they don't even realize how they're surrounding themselves, how they're allowing those people to get their time, energy, and attention, how much of those attitudes out there in the world from these individuals are influencing your own, until you start asking that question, right? And how you start saying, well, where did you first hear that, right? And who first
right.
planted that idea in your mind? And it's really fascinating because they will say it, case in point, this is how I feel today. And the reality is that it's probably not. It was probably put there somehow by some other environment, how we were raised, how we were grown, how we grew up and the influences that we had there, or perhaps current environment, right? Our boss is telling us this, or our coworker or colleague. And then you have to start to recognize how much of that is theirs, this other party's versus yours, and sort of decouple those and start to say, well, what do you think about that, right? How do you really think that that's true? And why do you think that they might say that? Is it out of an effort because they feel threatened, or they view you as a competitor, or they feel like that they see something in you that they wish they had, but they want to keep you down where they are because they don't want to be faced with the fact that you're going to be more successful, or more, you're going to reach a better level at work than they have. And it is kind of funny because we will take all these inputs and we allow them to sort of permeate our view of the world and our own thinking and what is possible and what is not. And so I think it's really interesting because, like you said, you know, Michael can decide whether that's an accurate fact or not, but likely would be like, well, if I decide to go to that level, well, I guess I'm going to test those. I'm going to test those environments and test those perspectives and see for myself whether that's true or if it is truly a myth. But most importantly, I'm not going to allow that myth to allow me the life raft of an excuse, just like you did. Not tall enough, no problem. I'll get higher heels, or I'm yeah, I need to work twice as hard as the male counterparts. Well, guess what? I'm willing to show up and do exactly that because I am not going to take what you think is the truth and make it my own. And I feel like a lot of people, when you start thinking about these things that are holding you back, it's really important to say how much of that is really ingrained in here and in your heart, that is true, that came from you versus where it came from someone else.
One of my mottos is be so good that they can't ignore you.
Yep. I love that
When I
motto, by the
speak
way.
on this, yeah, when I speak about this, I tell people I could have fought. My teacher didn't want me when I was studying percussion, didn't want to give me any parts to go on stage. And I mentioned this in a previous conversation. And I could either fight him for it, and I could threaten him and go to the dean about this because he was holding me back because of my gender, even
Yep.
though, in those days that wasn't as much of a factor, or it could be so good he couldn't ignore me and he could not put me on stage because I was the best keyboard player that they had. So that's what I did. I honed my craft
Yep.
to such an extent. When I speak to women's groups, they want to know, how women can progress and be equal to men in the workplace. My answer is be so good they can't ignore you, but don't be
I love
obnoxious
it.
about it. That's the whole point. Be the best you could be, gender aside, because
Yep.
the best you are, the more they can't ignore you. That's the whole point. I look at, the younger generations as they're coming into their own, and the TED community, for example, and those amazing fellows that are doing work that are blowing me away. And I see that gender is no longer an issue in their fields. They don't consider it. They don't speak to it. They're just trying to make a difference in this world in some way, shape, or form through the projects that they're doing or whatever. It's getting out of the myths that we have in our minds, the programs that we were told growing up, that you don't do things for you, you do things for the good of the tribe, the family.
Sure.
You
Yep.
don't just set yourself apart because that's selfish. All the paradigms, all the programs that we're taught, and it's learning how to have the conversation so it's a yes and conversation, not yes but. So it's
Yeah.
saying, you could view me as a horrible daughter if I don't come in for every single holiday, or you could recognize that I'm there for you 100% of the time, and I am choosing to be the best mother I can to give my son the holidays that he wants, surrounded by his friends and the life that he's made because he
Yeah.
was brought up in a different city. So, you have a choice. You could choose to view me as a horrible daughter. I'm not going to make everybody miserable in my world to try to satisfy a program that no longer is relevant.
Yeah.
That's the point. And it's to love and respect and say, you have a choice. You could view me as a horrible daughter or recognize the fact I speak to you 4 times a day. I'm there for you. I have love and attention for you. Just because it's a holiday doesn't mean that I have to be in there sitting around a table to prove it.
Yep. Yep. Yeah.
And it's how do you shift the conversation to a yes and that's what
Yeah.
it is.
I like that. And I think that what you just said is also an important thing to think about for yourself. You have a choice in whether you're allowing these myths to enable your excuses. And, that's the whole purpose of the conversation, right? Is what are those that are holding you back? So for our listeners and our viewers, what are those things? Pull out your journal, figure out what those things are that are really truly holding you back in your personal life and your professional life, and start to understand sort of the context of how those have taken anchor, and ultimately ask yourself, hey, am I going to choose to live in that reality, Or would I like a better choice? And would I like to do something different and no longer be held down, held back, or allow myself to be dictated by the perceptions of other people? But I want to be proud of the perception that I have of myself and how I carry forward. And I think that was the thing I really was intrigued about for this topic is like we find with almost every conversation that we have, it's about doing the work inside of here and inside of your heart so that you can start to really truly understand how can I be better at whatever it is that you want to be better at. And I think that's a really key component. And we often don't take the time to stop and have these very, very critical and important conversations with ourselves and really understand how much of that nonsense is holding us back.
That's it. And when you take out that journal and you jot these things down, I'm going to underscore the fact that you don't have to have the answers for how to change them. The first step is to recognize that they're there.
Yep.
And then you could have the relevant conversations with a trusted advisor, a coach, whatever it is, in order to help you process it and move through it in a
Yep.
way that it is sustainable, that you could literally stick to, and that doesn't make things worse, um, and helps you choose that path to a life that's very fulfilling.
And you hit on it perfectly, and I think actually that's a point that we can definitely double emphasize is oftentimes when you do have the courage to do this activity and you see there are things that you don't like or maybe don't know how to correct on your own, that is exactly when you get a coach involved in your life because sometimes you don't know, well, yeah, that is where I'm at and I don't know how to get out of it. That's where you need to raise your hand and say, I need a little bit of help. I need some additional input. I need some guidance. I need to, have somebody in my corner to help me overcome these. I recognize, and that's the first thing, recognizing that you have areas that you want to improve, that you've got myths that you've been buying into, which have allowed you to make these excuses, and you don't want to continue that. That's huge, huge
Right.
step. And when you get there, that's phenomenal, but you'll probably need a little buoyancy in that bounce to go forward, and that's where a coaching or a consulting relationship can really benefit you. And I highly, highly encourage people to be open to that because we all need somebody in order to be successful. And Donna and I rely on each other a lot, and we have been each other's sounding boards for so many years, I care to admit, more years than I care to admit. But at the end of the day, we all have to come to that and be able to set the ego aside and say, I need some guidance. I need some help. And I
Yeah,
wanted, I want to be able to improve in these areas of my life or my career or my leadership style or my relationship at home, etc. And there's no shame in that. In fact, it's a hugely powerful first step to take. And then having someone in your corner that can help you get there is a winning combination.
for sure. For
Yep.
sure.
Well, this is again another powerful, enlightening topic to cover. I'm anxious to hear what our viewers and our listeners think about this conversation. What did they take away? What questions do they have? Donna, how can they share this valuable input with us and become more involved in the Inquiring Minds movement that we are trying to create on our different platforms?
You could get Steve at ripplecentral.com. I'm at donnacarlin.com with a K. And you could get us through email. Our social media links are on there. And as well, Facebook, we have Inquiring Minds with Donna Carlin and Steve Harper. Join in on the conversation. Let us know what you'd like us to discuss, or if you want us to take a conversation to another level. It also has all of our videos there. So if you want to go back and rewatch something, you have access to the links there or on YouTube, obviously. And we would love to hear from you.
Absolutely. And two things to point out on the Facebook community that I think are important for everybody. Number one, it only becomes community when you show up and participate because we're there. We'll be there. We'll be happy to have a conversation in the open environment where everybody can learn from the back and forth or scheduling something, just even on a one-on-one. Donna and I would make ourselves available for a Zoom call or a conversation to, collectively or individually. So that's one thing. The other aspect is, just because we have all these older videos out there from prior episodes doesn't mean that we're not paying attention to those comments. So if you see something specific, feel free to contribute right there in the community, or you can comment on that prior video and we still get notifications. So we're definitely paying attention and watching, and we encourage you to be an active participant and be a part of the community, because that is what makes this show great, is starting these conversations, getting those, that conversation ball rolling. But it's really, the hustle behind the muscle really becomes, the participation from you as our listeners and our viewers. So we are so grateful for you to do that. So please, join us on the Facebook community, because we would love to have you.
Definitely.
All right, Donna. Well, it was another great episode. Thank you so much for the time and for putting this topic on the table to discuss, because I think it's a powerful one. But I look forward to our next one. We will be back very soon with another episode of Inquiring Minds. But until then, take care of yourself.
Have a great week.